Hello and welcome back to my channel. So Mondays, Spiritual Mondays, we talked about names, and that's the topic for this week. So we talked about how name is a word or a set of words by which a person, animal, place, or thing is known, addressed, or referred to. So I talked about how God has many different names because he revealed himself in such a way that people were able to experience him, and at that experience they released a name for him. And us being reflections of God, that our names also can speak to our characteristics. So I hope that after seeing that, like, it made you think about different names in the Bible, different things like that. And maybe it made you think of your own name. So that's what we're talking about today in Lifestyle Wednesdays. My name, my children's name, my husband's name. And then as far as our lifestyle, certain labels or brands or names that we tend to like. Let's start with my husband. His name is Cy. His middle name is Bartholomew, which is, if you didn't know, was a disciple that walked with Jesus. So his grandmother gave him his middle name, and then his mother gave him his first name. And when I looked it up, Cy means of the forest. Or it also means, it also comes from the word Simon. And we talked about Simon on Monday. Simon's was the original name for the disciple that we know as Peter. So it's like he almost has like two disciples as his name. So it's like a double disciple. But Simon means he who hears. So it's like him listening, and because he listens, God has heard. So it's like twofold. Like he listens to God, and because of that, God listens to him. And that is very evident in my husband's life. So for my name, names can be broken into, have different meanings because of different backgrounds. So like the Bible, the Old Testament is Hebrew, the New Testament is Greek. So you may have your name may have a meaning like in English, in Arabic, in Hebrew, in Latin, different things like that, Spanish, different things like that. So my name has dual meaning. One means the valley, and that's like the is that the English? Yeah, that's the English. It means valley, or girl of the valley. And then the Latin name is divine. So it's connected to fertility and God, because there was a Roman goddess of fertility and childbirth. She was also connected to hunting and the moon. So like a super like feminine name. So I've always known the duality of my name, girl of the valley and then divine. And the valley is very low, and of course anything divine is usually high. So I've always known that about my name. But when I did some research on, I was researching grace, and I never knew that Anna meant grace or gracious. And I had been studying grace, and then I heard a sermon, and it talked about Anna. There's an Anna in the Bible. And I've talked about, I don't know if I talked about her. I think in the past I was talking about women that I related to in the Bible, and Deborah, I was like, yes, like I feel very much like, like a Deborah. But Anna was in the Bible, and she was one that was very gracious. She was a widow in the Bible, but she was one that really evangelized and prophesied and really shared about the Messiah, the King being born into the earth, Jesus. So her name meant grace, and I never knew that her name meant grace. So it made me think, my parents, I guess my sister Teresa ended up actually naming me because my mom's name is Lee and her middle name is Anna, but because Lee is kind of a masculine name and people would kind of get confused when they would call or whatever, my mother ended up going by her first and middle name. Like, so most people know my mom is Lee Anna. And my dad's sister, my aunt, her name is Anna. So they decided, they knew that they were going to name me Anna, but they didn't know like what. And I think they were tossing around like Brianna, all different kind of Annas. And my sister was like, name her Deanna. So I think that that's awesome, especially once I was studying how awesome and great Grace is to be named like the Grace. So I really love that. I'll get into my daughter's name. Her name is Jada, Jayda. And she ended up, at first she didn't even really, I had two names that I was going between, Jada and Jada, but I really wanted to name her Jada, and I can't even remember, it was like this weird way that I spelled it, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna name her Jada. Well, we get into the hospital, I have her, and then my mom is like, nah, you shouldn't name her that, I'm not gonna remember that, and I'm definitely not gonna know how to spell that. And I was like, what? And so I was just like, I just kind of looked at her for a while because I was like, oh, Jada was kind of the backup name. And I was like, I don't really want to name you that. Like, I was pretty sure on Jada. And my mom was like, no. And I just kind of followed my mom in that. So her name we ended up naming her Jada. But for a while, she had my maiden name. She was baby girl Hodges, like in the hospital. I was looking at her like, what is your name? So her name is Jada. So in Hebrew, it can mean yada, which it means he knows, or the knowing one. So have you ever heard the phrase like yada, yada, yada? Like it's almost assuming that you should know that, like, you know, this. And I find that awesome because my daughter is like just super intelligent, like just really smart, really intelligent young lady that knows, and sometimes she knows a little too much. But also associated with her name, of course, Jada is very close to and derived from the word jade, which that's a precious stone. It usually comes in different arrays of green, and people will wear that stone to have fortune, to receive love, and even I end up finding out people will wear it for protection, especially like protection in their stomach and stuff like that. That was one thing I didn't know. So for my son, the story with my son's name was, once I found out that I was pregnant, like immediately I was like, his name is Elijah. And Elijah means, my God is Lord. And if you read the Bible, then you know like Elijah was like a major like prophet in the Bible. But I didn't know that at the time. I just knew, I was like, his name is Elijah. So I wouldn't even let people call him like baby, or once we found out he was a boy, like baby boy, I was like, no, his name is Elijah. Like, so my family and everybody addressed him as Elijah. I was like, that's his name. And a week before I had him, I was like, his name is Jaden. And my family was like, what? Like, we've been calling him Elijah this whole time, and you've been so stern that that's his name. And I was like, no, it's Jaden. And I stuck to it. And his name means thankful, or God will judge. And then another meaning of his name is God has heard. so that, and it also, because God has heard, it means that you are well spoken. So I really love that that's his name, and I really love that when I call his name, it's really saying that he's well spoken. I've talked about, I think in a video or before, our son Jaden is 15 years old. He'll be 16, but he has autism, and what affects him most with his autism is speech. So he has a diagnosis as well for speech delay. And I love the fact that like we can speak when we're calling him and calling his name, like we're really speaking to him from that place of wholeness and health that God desires for him. So we're always calling him to speak well to God, and God will hear. So I really love that. So those are like our names. We really don't do a lot of like nicknames. My husband's name, his first name is so short. It's literally Sy, S-Y. So there's really we don't really have nicknames. Sometimes he'll call me D. I really don't like people to call me like sometimes people call me Diana because that's a more popular like English name of Deanna, but I'm like, no, like I just like being called my full name. So sometimes he'll call me D or Babe or something like that. And then our children, we call them by their name as well. Like sometimes, like when they were little, because both of their names start with J-A-Y, we will call them like little Jaybirds. And we'd be like, oh, especially my papa, he used to always be like, oh, those are my Jaybirds. So we kind of did that for a little while, but for the most part, we just call them by their name. Or my daughter's name, her middle name for both of our children, my son got my dad's first name, and my daughter got my grandmother passed a week before she was born, and I gave her part of my grandmother's name and part of my mom's name as her middle name. So her name is Jada Rosalie. But sometimes I'll call her Jada Rose. I love that. I was just like, well, you already have your famous name if you ever become famous, Jada Rose. So what about you? What are some names that you go by? Are you addressed by any other name? Have you talked to your parents? Like, how did they come up with your name? If you have children, how did you come up with your children's name? Was it as dramatic and extra as what I did? So I'm interested to know. So comment below, let me know. As far as our lifestyle, we are not really into names and labels. My mother did sharecropping when she was younger, like from the age of 14, and she worked in plants, all from Alabama to Florida. My sister has worked in manufacturing and food processing and quality care, food, in so many places, from Iowa to here in Texas, and bakeries, dog food, chicken nuggets, all kind of companies that she's worked for. So one of the things that we learned was, as far as food, sometimes these brand labels and the off labels are processed in the same warehouse. So let's say that we have a bin of fruit, a huge bin of fruit, pineapples, let's say, and they're canning them. Well, like a company like Dole can decide, like, hey, I want the cream. Like, I want the cream of the crop. I want the top. So they would get their stuff canned first, and then the off labels will kind of get what's left. But it's all the same fruit from all the same crops. So we tend to not really care about that too much as far as like our food. Living in San Antonio, Texas, H-E-B is here. It's kind of the biggest grocer here, and they also not only have storefronts, but they handle all the packaging and the manufacturing for their brand, so they don't outsource that to anybody. So their products are just as of quality as anything else. So as far as our food, we really don't care about like labels in that way. Restaurants, now that we care about, like we love really good steaks and stuff like that. So we have certain places that we like to go. So those places, when we kind of eat out, we're a little bit more picky or precise with like where we're getting stuff. Our son has a food allergy of dairy and soy, so I do check a lot of labels, because in the brands I can say have got better about this. Like there was like this shift of like knowing a lot of children have food allergies, or adults, people period. So sometimes labels can be a little tricky, because they'll really push, you know, big things like non-fat or low carb, whatever is the trend at the time, on the front of the box. But you know, you have to flip that box over and really read the label and know what that is. Even if it's a long word, you know, most of them I can't pronounce, but I will Google it and be like, okay, what is that? So knowing what those products are, because sometimes they'll come up with a long word just for it to say like this is a particular additive that we just don't care for, or it's sugar. Like I'm like, why do you have to make that so long? It's just sugar. Just say sugar. But we try to go with, sometimes they'll have labels, and now a lot of labels have their own like natural brand. We saw that shift a lot with peanut butter and different things like that. So they stopped doing as many additives, and they add those things to have longer shelf life, to keep particular colors, because we have certain cues. It's certain ways, like what the definition name means. Like it's certain ways that you address things, it's certain ways that you see things, you know. So they'll add these things to look a certain way, just how they kind of like spray and put all that stuff on apples to where you see the wax on it, to where it'll look beautiful. So sometimes, because they know we see or eat with our eyes before, a lot of additives sadly are because of the demands of the consumer. We see an apple a certain way, we want it to look really red and shiny and bright and things like that. So a lot of those things are added to give longer shelf life and things like that. So we're mindful of that. And like I said in a previous video, I shop once a week for groceries anyway, so I'm only buying groceries for that week. So we're fine with not having something that will last weeks and weeks and weeks. So that's something with that. With phones, laptops, cars, we're like I said, we really don't have like brands or names that we're like, that's it, you know. Like we're not iPhone people. My husband has a MacBook. I had a Dell, I had a HP. Like we don't really care about that. That stuff is not, you know, like certain TVs or none of those labels. We really, whatever. Like with our car, we're like, what does it cost? What's the gas mileage on it? Like those are not things that we're looking for. Like, oh, I have to have this brand of a car. I have to have this brand of a TV or a camera or whatever like that. Tomorrow I will get into, because I do understand why some people do go after those brands. Those brands tend to have a certain culture, a certain character built around them. There's a level of quality or service that you get from those. So I'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow. I mean Friday, as far as fashion and beauty, and why you would buy some of those items and things to look for. But that's really it for today, guys. So let me know again, is there certain names that you really associate with something that you kind of have to have? Have you talked to your parents? How did they come up with your name? How did you name your children? Are there meanings to that? Have you saw where what you name a thing, how it associates with the actual character of it? So let me know, guys. You know that I love for us to interact, for you to comment below, to keep sharing, to keep have your friends come on and subscribe, and let's continue the conversation. Again, I love you, God loves you, and have a blessed day. Bye.